I grew up in Yonkers, New York, and as a kid growing up, like just about everybody in America, I idolized Mickey Mantle. And I was fortunate enough to meet him when I grew up and was in the business world. And we became friends, but he was always Mickey Mantle to me, in the sense that I never got to the point where, oh, that's Mickey. I always had him on a pedestal. You know, what really happened with him is that television really reached a critical mass in the 50s, where everyone had a TV. And I think it helped both him and Elvis Presley in the sense that all of a sudden they were in everybody's house, where the sport of baseball was almost a regional sport. It went as far west as Kansas City and as far south as Washington. So every week on Saturday would be the game of the week, and more than likely it was always the Yankees and Mickey Mantle. And here was this, Herculean type individual who hit the ball the furthest, and he ran the fastest of anybody. And he did it, as Casey Stengel said, he was the best one-legged ball player I ever managed. And he did it all with, severe injuries. So it's pretty amazing what he did accomplish. At page 130 of my book, I talk a little about, they talk about the pressure that the players are under today, Judge and all these guys, like, to perform. But picture Mickey Mantle is 19 years old. He comes from Commerce, Oklahoma, and his favorite movie was The Last Picture Show. And if you remember that movie, it was like a movie theater and a gas station, like there was nothing there. And he came from this, rural America, and suddenly the media in New York is saying he's better than Babe Ruth and Joe DiMaggio. That's not pressure, right? And he moves, to New York City. He's inflicted with a very serious injury to his knee, and he's never really was the same, he never had the same physical ability after that injury. I wonder, today if how much he could have been helped by all the stuff they have, probably a lot. He also didn't help himself because he never did any rehab. The Yankees in the off season would tell him, do this, do that, and he would rather hang around with Billy Martin, which, he said probably shortened his career. But Billy Martin said when he roomed with me, he won the Triple Crown, so how much could I have hurt him? He was sent back to the minor leagues. This is all this 1 year. He was called by the military to serve, and because of his ailments, he was 4F. But somehow that was extrapolated as he was a draft dodger, and he got booed for that. He also got booed by a lot of Joe DiMaggio's fans, saying, who is this kid? Who does he think he is? And he didn't ingratiate himself to the fans because he was so shy and humble that he would run around the bases with his head down, and they thought he was aloof or something. The fans in New York never really got him until Roger Maris came. Then they started booing Roger Maris, and Mantle said to Maris, oh, you've inherited all my fans. Is this moving? No. This is supposed to be moving. Every minute 24. I was wondering why everybody was paying attention to me. I thought they'd be looking at the script. Yeah, boy, I'm really.
It's just getting bigger.
Huh? There, okay.
So now is it going too fast?
No, that's about the side. Well, yeah, that's good. Yeah, oh yeah, it's going way too fast, yeah. I mean, I could do it manually every minute or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Wait a minute, I gotta talk and do this at the same time. I can't tie my shoes.
Okay, there, now it's going.
Okay,
That's the first one, I guess it is.
that's about 51, 52. Mickey came to New York in basically a straw suitcase. I mean, he was really from Oklahoma. He was, So a lot of things happened to him. His father passed away. He met an agent who he signed a contract with an agent that he was going to take 50% of all future earnings. And Mickey signed the contract. And it took the Yankees a long time to get that. He actually lured Mantle. There was a girl at the Copa who Mickey fell in love with. And she was in cahoots with the agent, they found out later, years later. And his father flew up from Oklahoma or took a train, however he got here, and he ordered Mickey to marry his childhood sweetheart because he said, she's not our kind. Her name was Holly. And the father, you know, he was right. It wound up that Holly was in cahoots with the agent. So he did, like 1951 was rough. The population of Commerce, Oklahoma was 6,000 people. And opening day, he's 19 years old. He's in right field, and he looks to his right. He sees Joe DiMaggio. And Ted Williams is coming up, and there's 72,000 people in the stadium. So if you just picture what that must have been like for him, you know. You know, my room, when I was growing up, I just had pictures of Mickey Mantle. The whole room was Mickey Mantle. And I just remember going to Yankee Stadium and seeing the ushers who had these red uniforms. They were like elderly guys, and their whole purpose was to keep you out of the good seats, and they would go back to where you were, the upper deck somewhere, you know. So, and Mickey Mantle, you know, was somebody who was like 500 feet away or 300 feet away in the field, and you know, he was constantly looking at him. I remember from Yonkers, you had to go down the Major Deegan to get to Yankee Stadium, and a lot of people remember, I don't know who went that route, but do you remember when you smelled the bread going down the Major Deegan? It was Stella Dora. So when you start smelling the bread, you're getting close to Yankee Stadium. One of the worst moments of my life was getting stuck in traffic in the Major Deegan, listening to the game on the radio, and Mantle hit a home run. It was like, you know, horrible. Like growing up in Yonkers, everyone wanted to wear number 7. That was the whole thing. In Yonkers, usually the toughest kid on the team got number 7. So I was about the 41st toughest kid in my neighborhood. I told that to my son. He said, gee, Dad, how come you were 41? I said, Luke, you should have seen the first 40. You know, like 41 was good. The first time I met Mantle was 1968, I was in the Army in Fort Hood, Texas. I was in the old unit of General Patton, and Elvis Presley was in that unit. So that's the only thing that made it bearable, that I was doing something that Elvis did, and he was another one of my idols. And I was going home on leave, January '68, and I got to Love Field, which became infamous for another reason. And there, sitting much like in a room like this, I'm in my uniform, and Mickey Mantle is sitting all by himself, like waiting for a flight. And it blew my mind. I said, I got to somehow meet him. So we boarded the plane. I was lucky because there was a sergeant major in my unit who was some sort of distant, like, relative to Mantle. And I knew enough about Mantle that, you know, his privacy was really important, you know, that people were always bothering him. So I wrote him a little note, and I just said, I'm in Sergeant Kerr's unit, and I'd love to come up and shake your hand. And the airline stewardess went up, and she gave him the note, and he turned around, and he went like this. And you know the term deer in the headlights? That's where it started, because when he did that, my feet turned to concrete blocks, and I walked up the aisle like this, and he said, have a seat. And he couldn't have been nicer, because I was there for over an hour. And I guess I caught him in a talkative mood. And then every time the stewardess would come by, he would say, would Mickey Mantle like another drink? And he was drinking Chivas Regal, and Mickey Mantle always wanted another Chivas Regal. And I also get the feeling, he lived in Dallas, that he had a long relationship with the headquarters of the American Airline stewardesses, whose headquarters were in Dallas. The thing I remember about that flight, the one thing he told me was that this is 1968, so this is, you know, his last year. He's going into his last year. And things were, you know, pretty rough for him. And I always thought it was because of his legs, whatever. He said, no. He said the main reason was that he had nobody batting behind him. Maris, Berra, they had all retired. So he had, you know, he started swinging at pitches that normally he wouldn't swing at, because he said he would only get maybe one good pitch a game, because they'd walk him. I mean, that year he walked like 130 times, only batted like 245, but they were still very much afraid of him. That's when he was young and he went down to first base in 3.1 seconds. Anybody know who that is? Hall of Fame Yankee? No. Bill Dickey. Bill Dickey was a catcher. But when Mantle was in spring training, they had all the rookies do a 50-yard dash. And they clocked Mantle, and they said, there's something wrong with the stopwatch. Do it again. They clocked him again. They made him do it 3 times, and they said, this is how fast he runs. You know, so he was, I think that's the mythology of Mantle, is that he probably had more natural ability, his body, I mean, his power and the speed, than anybody who ever played. And the words, you know, what might have been, are always attached to him. Even though he made the Hall of Fame, it was like that unknown, how good could this guy have been? You know, the only years that he was, you know, healthy, he won the Triple Crown or he hit 54 homers, and almost every other season he was injured. Roger Maris. So anyway, we're on the plane and I met him and that was it. And, you know, he retired. And then in 1958, I worked for U.S. Tobacco along with this guy here, Tom Labasco. And Skoal Chewing Tobacco had their advertising term was a pinch is all it takes. So I came up with the idea of the Skoal Pinch Hitter Award. And every year we gave the Pinch Hitter Award to the best pinch hitter in the major leagues. And so we were invited to the dinner at the Waldorf to present the award to whoever won it. And I sat at a table with Maury Allen, who was a writer for the Post. And he told me a story that he said that Mickey didn't get along good with the writers. He was, you know, I don't know. I mean, they didn't reveal anything. I mean, they could have said a lot of things about his behavior off the field, but he was a little bit angry. I'm not sure what he was angry about, but Maury Allen said one day he was standing at the batting cage, and he's just standing there, Maury Allen, trying to get a story for the day, and Mantle turns to him and says, you know, it pisses me off just looking at you, he says to Maury Allen. Maury Allen makes the mistake of going home and telling his wife and 2 daughters what Mickey Mantle said. So for the next 40 years of his life, they would walk into a room and say to him, pisses us off just looking at you. So he was, that night at the Pinch Hitter Award dinner, Roger Maris was there for some reason, and I wound up, the dinner ended, and we wound up in a Jimmy Wesson's bar, and Maris and Mantle were there, you know, watching the Hagler-Hearns fight. And I got a real insight on Mantle and Maris, which was, somebody asked me about the movie 61?
Yes.
They portrayed, those character portrayals were wonderful. Maris was shy, withdrawn, probably more rural than Mantle, North Dakota. And they were at the bar, the 2 of them, and Roger Maris looked like he didn't want to be there. He was just very uncomfortable being in a bar, and, you know, where Mantle was like a fish in water, buying people drinks, people buying him drinks, flirting with women, and the contrast was very, very interesting. That's, you know, that's what I took away from that. It's all in the book. It's all in the book. While at UST, we started a company called Cabin Fever Entertainment. We did a lot of, we had the video rights to Lonesome Dove and the Little Rascals, the original. And then we came up with a concept to do the 500 Home Run Club, the guys who had hit 500 home runs. And So I said, well, who should be the host of it? And of course, I wanted Mickey Mantle to be the host of it. And so we contacted his agent, blah, blah, blah. So he agreed to host it. And then I had read somewhere that the only sportscaster writer he really liked was Bob Costas. So I arranged that Costas would be the host. And they would talk about the 12 guys that in those days who hit 500 homers. And there were only 12 before steroids. So it was special, And the story that Costas, which he still does it to this day, he carries a Mickey Mantle baseball card in his wallet. And people ask him, why do you do that? And he says, well, everyone should carry a religious artifact around with them. So Mickey came in that morning, and he wasn't in the best of moods, but he saw Costas, and it changed his whole mood. And they sat in the Yankee locker room, and they talked about, in fact, there may be a picture of them in the Yankee locker room, but
Is it past this or before?
Huh?
Is it past this, do you know?
Oh, I don't know. It'll come up. I mean, if you see a picture of Bob Costas, that was the day we shot the 500 home run club. And they talked about, there were clips of what happened, the 500 home, the 12 guys, and they told stories. The thing I remember, they talked about Babe Ruth. And I didn't realize that until Ruth played, there weren't foul poles because no one hit the ball that high. Like his homers were so majestic that they couldn't tell if they were fair or foul. So they had to put up the foul poles just to kind of tell. And how apropos. What I remember about Ted Williams is that they told the story that when he was a rookie, he came to the Red Sox. And all the veterans came up to Ted Williams and said, wait till you see Jimmy Fox hit. There's power. Wait till you see Jimmy Fox. And Williams said, wait till Fox sees me hit. So it shows you the confidence he had as a young player. And I told the story before that Mickey said he sat with him at an all-star game. And Williams was giving him advice. And Mantle said, I didn't get a hit for 2 weeks. You do this with your shoulder and, so we're going to do the 500 home run club, and there was a pretty good connection with Mantle because of country music. I met him at the Regency Hotel. I had to call his room, and then he answered the phone, and I did a Jackie Gleason imitation, humma, humma, humma. It was like, he said, oh, are you the video guy? I'll be right down. So I met him in the coffee shop, and my opening line to him was that, I'm probably the 10,000th person who's come to you with a deal, which was true in New York. He called them slickers, guys with, I'm going to make you a lot of money, Mickey, and blah, blah. So, but we had a little connection with country music because we started talking about country music and we kind of hit it off there. And eventually when we got to know each other a little, I introduced him to Charlie Daniels, who we were doing business with. The Devil went down to Georgia. There they are. This is very weird because I've given this talk a lot, and usually the pictures have nothing to do with what I'm saying. But it was a big deal for Charlie because he said he grew up in North Carolina listening to Mickey on the radio, and he says like meeting Mickey Mantle was, even for someone like Charlie Daniels. And they became friends. Charlie wrote a song called Same Old Me. Charlie's very patriotic. And the lyrics in the song said, why can't someone like John Wayne or Mickey Mantle be president? And Mickey called him and said, I'm a little unhappy with your song. And he said, why? He said, why? And he said, why'd you have to go put John Wayne in my song? So we met at the 500 home run club, and we wanted to go out. So his girlfriend Greer said to my wife, who was there with my son, and one of the great thrills of my life is at the shoot was Mickey. I turned and I saw my son, who was about 7, talking to Mickey, and it was like it was like just special. You people that have sons, and I think Mickey asked him what position he played in the Little League, but it was a magic moment. So the first time we went out, when you went out with Mickey Mantle, he called all the shots, where you ate, everything. He was very self-centered because his whole life was, like Jeff said, people like Giuliani, Trump, Eisenhower coming up to him at the Regency. Like some mornings, I'd go down and eat, have breakfast with him. And he wouldn't eat. He'd have something called the Breakfast of Champions, which was Kahlua and vodka. I don't know what it was. And these people, in those days, the Regency was like the power place with the Tisches and all these famous people. And they would come up to him, like Eisenhower one morning, right? The guy was like, the leader of the Allied forces in World War II and president 2 terms. And he'd come up to Mantle like a little kid. And they would leave, and Mickey would go, I don't get it. He never got, I was a ball player. And he was right in a way that, but he touched people, and I don't know, it's all over the country. So we went to a Chinese restaurant, and I remember the first night when I walked in the Chinese restaurant with Mickey Mantle, I wanted everyone I ever knew to be at the restaurant to see me walk in with Mickey Mantle. I wanted my ex-in-laws, the teachers that didn't like me. I wanted them all to be there and go, hey, look at Tom, he made it, They put us in a back room behind a screen so no one would bother Mickey, so no one saw us. It was interesting that, like some of the things that his favorite movie was The Last Picture Show. We talked about it before, why. And his other favorite movie was What's Eating Gilbert Grape, which kind of surprised, I didn't quite know why, but he had a son that was mentally challenged. I don't know if he had autism or he was on the spectrum or something, but there was something wrong with the kid, and I guess the character played by Leonardo DiCaprio had a lot of issues, and it reminded him of his son Billy. And then during the, I should have brought my wallet because I still have this memorabilia. So the check came, and he said, I'll tell you what, I'm thinking of 3 numbers. If you guess the numbers, I'll pay for the dinner. I said, okay, so what would you have said if Mickey said, what 3 numbers would you have? No, 3. Yeah, no, he said, well, you're close to the real answer. I said 536, which was the amount of homers he hit. And he said, no. Now, he could have said anything, I was going, but he said 3, 4, and 5, which were the retired Yankee numbers. And then he was number 7, the next one. And I think personally, the Yankees have just ruined it now. They retire the guy in the, like, cutting the grass now at Yankee Stadium. So, so he said, so I picked up the tab, or Cabin Fever picked up the tab, and he said, give me a $20 bill. He said, I'll make it worthwhile. And on the bill, there's women in the room. I can't say what he wrote on the bill, but it was something like, F you, a-hole, Mickey Mantle. He said, this will be worth more than what you paid for the dinner. And he was right. I still have it. We won so the 500 Home Run Club won Video of the Year. We went around, we did different shows, and I don't know how many people heard the Carl Furillo story, where he was signing autographs at the Jacob Javits Center, and some kid came up and he said, can you make it out to Bob Furillo? And it was Carl Furillo's, his son. Carl Furillo was a right fielder for the Brooklyn Dodgers, won the batting championship one year. And Mickey showed a side of himself where he got up around the table and he shook the kid's hand. He said Carl Furillo had passed away. He had a tough life. He wound up he worked on construction afterward, because in those days they didn't make the money they're making. So he had a tough life afterward. And Mickey said, I really respected your father. I loved playing with him. So it showed us a side of him that was very warm. Some of this, I have a chapter in the book of just like some of the things that I personally remember of Mickey Mantle. I grew up in Yonkers. There was a field called Welty Field on Miles Square Road. And I just remember being 12 years old, being at the baseball field, and someone running saying, Mickey hit the roof, Mickey hit the roof, meaning the ball that hit the facade that almost went out. And it's in my brain. I just remember being in left field and somebody running around saying, Mickey hit the roof. As we all know, he hit it another time. That one, the ball was coming down. The other one, the ball was going up, and they estimated the ball would have went like 620 feet. So Mantle had incredible power. I mean, even the guys on steroids. I think guys like McGuire probably hit the ball as far, but I don't think anybody hit it further consistently. Like with the year with him and Maris, his homers were like 100 feet further than Maris most of the time. You know, Maris would 350, Mantles would go 450. I was also at the game. I was actually at the game in 1964 when he hit a home run in the bottom of the ninth to beat the Cardinals in the '64 series. The ball almost hit me. It was like ironic, you know. He was booed a lot. Mantle was really booed a lot up until he won the Triple Crown because the expectations were so high for him. And I just remember, you know, as a kid going there and him getting booed, and I couldn't figure out why. And then that so turned around that when he got hurt with Maris with the home run race, the empathy from the fans, he became, quote, the real Yankee. Maris wasn't a real Yankee. And I think that, look at the Yankees today with Judge and Stanton. If they start getting into some kind of race, I think that Judge will be perceived as a real Yankee, where Stanton came over, Johnny come lately. And it'll be, I haven't seen any sports writers kind of write about that, but I think that's a possibility. Talking about his power, I was at another game just before I went in the Army in '66. It was Old Timers Day. Old left-hander Hank Aguirre was pitching. And Mantle, batting righty, hit a grand slam homer in the upper deck. What made it unique was that he was batting right-handed, and he hit it in the right field upper deck. So when a left-hand batter hit it in the upper deck, it was something, you know, upper deck homer in Yankee Stadium. But it was a left-handed batter. So you guys who know baseball, you know, Mantle hit it up there as a right-handed batter, which you have to have, you know, terrific power. Another thing was when I met my wife, we got married, and I didn't have a lot of demands, except she had to watch Old Timers Day every year. And that was probably kind of a weird demand, but, you know, I just wanted her to see Mantle, you know. And that one Old Timers Day, he hit a home run, you know, and the people went berserk. You know, this was like 5 years after he retired. Isn't that a nice picture? It's pretty relaxed there. The Charlie Daniels, you know, I told you about, you know, that story that him and Charlie became really good friends. They spoke to each other in the hospital when Mickey passed away. And we had promoted a concert at Yankee Stadium, my company, Charlie Daniels, after a Yankee game. And I asked Mickey if he wanted to introduce, you know, Charlie. And he said, yeah, you know, he loved country music, you know. And I remember a couple of things about that day. One was like walking out with Mickey in Yankee Stadium, you know, to the bandstand. I said, oh, this is crazy. How did I get here? You know, it was like a good day, really good day. And then we got to the stage, and they had, were you there, Tom? No. We had, there were steps, and so we didn't figure that. How can Mickey make it up the steps? But he struggled, and he made it up the steps. And the thing I remember was that he basically ignored the executives, the Yankee executives, you know, and yet the grounds crew, he went out of his way. Some of the old timers were still there. Hey, John, hey, Mickey, you know, it showed you know, he was kind of like a working man's hero. You couldn't be too cute around him. You couldn't be an executive trying to, you know. He would call me, occasionally he would call me at the office, and the first time he called me, my secretary on the intercom hit the intercom and said, Tom, Mickey Mantle's on the phone for you. It didn't mean a lot to her, you know, and it was like, so I called her in. I said, Denise, when Mickey Mantle calls, you don't use the intercom. I was sitting on the floor with all the lawyers and the accountants and the vice presidents, right? So when Mickey Mantle calls, you go, Tom, Mickey Mantle, for you on the phone. But he, you know, it was one time, you know, he was so humble, but one night he had he had a few drinks in him, and I just remember him saying, you know, when I was right, meaning not injured, he said, I was better than them all. And I think that's how most people felt, and it was weird that he would say that. But, you know, like down deep inside is probably how he felt. He had a great sense of humor. One of the tapes we did was how to catch bass, and I sent him a copy of the bass tape for him to watch while he was in the hospital. So I get a phone message, said, I don't know, somebody gave, so Mickey Mantle called and wanted to know, how did you know that he couldn't catch fish? So August 13th, 1995, Mickey passed away, and which I think I taught in the book, I think what brings it the complete circle to me is that from hanging up pictures, and you know, I idolized him as a kid, and I called him in the hospital to see, you know, see how he was, and I don't think he knew how bad he was. I said, this was in June, and he died in August, and Old Timers Day was coming up, and I wanted to know if he was going to Old Timers Day, and he said, no, the doctors won't let me. So I said, well, why don't you do a video, you know, that you can show up on the screen to the fans? He said, that's a good idea. He says, you know, the Yankees will never believe it was my idea because they think I'm stupid, you know, which showed you, again, his, you know, humbleness. So he said to me, what should I say, you know, and I just gave him a couple ideas, but the point I'm making is that if somebody would have said to me, your life would take a turn where you would help Mickey Mantle write his like farewell, as it turned out to be, I would have said, what the hell happened in my life that I got to that point, you know, helping him write his farewell speech. And I remembered one of the things, you know, he was always fairly down on himself, you know what I mean? I remember once telling him that what he was missing was, you know, that he made people happy. I said, you know, you have no idea. You made people happy, you know, watching you. You know, fathers, and also you know, fathers and sons bonded watching Yankee games in those days. And when he finally passed away, there were a lot of different quotes in the paper. I mean, Donald Trump said that there was never a bigger star in New York than Mickey Mantle. And it coming from Donald Trump, that's, you know, who probably thought he was the biggest star. The president of Starbucks, who helped me, Howard Schultz, he said that when Mantle died, people that he grew up with, kids that he played ball with in the sandlot, wherever they played, called him and said, gee, Mickey died. Meaning their childhood, it was something from their childhood that, you know, that they carried with them their whole lives. So, you know, in closing, I think, you know, I think baseball is, you know, it's a great thing because it's one of the few things you carry with you from your childhood. And also, if you have children, you know, it's something like me and my son. My son's now 39, but, you know, the communication's always open because we can talk about the Yankees. You know what I mean? It never closed. The Yankees win today, or so it's a good thing. And I left one thing out when I said Mantle hit the roof twice. In doing the research to write the book, because I just didn't want it to be just my memories. I did I wanted stuff to be in the book that people weren't aware of. And one of the things was that Mantle, in 56, about a month before he hit the facade again, he had 2 homers versus the Athletics, and on the 6th of May off Ed Burchowski, he hit one that hit the facade down the right field line, a line drive that hit the facade. So he hit the facade 3 times. And as far as I know, he was the only person ever to hit the facade. So everyone knows the 2. Now the 3rd one didn't almost go out, but it did hit the facade. And in closing, a piece of trivia. This was in the paper. What occupations, before they became famous, what did they do occupationally? Things they did. And Martha Stewart she babysat Mickey Mantle's children. You can't make it up. So, and that's it.
You're watching Lewisboro Community Television, Channel 20.